Lina, thank you so much for joining us today. We would love to learn from you. Uh, but in order to get us started, we'd love to get to know you a bit more. Would you share your background and what inspires you?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for that intro. Yeah, so I'm Lina. I'm from New York. Just finished my first year at Yale. Very interested in studying economics and data science, and I think one of the main motivators for me is really like my family, but also a commitment to knowledge, a commitment to curiosity, a commitment to like a search for truth in a sense. Being very interested in learning more about the world, which is probably why I chose econ, just because it's so interdisciplinary, learning a lot about like the globe, how financial systems work, and things like that. Always like constantly learning. And like my parents, they used to work in like the restaurant industry, so they're very much in the business space. So having that early grounding definitely has influenced me a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Um, so, Lina, to get us started, would love to understand when did you decide to aim for Ivy League colleges? At what age, what grade did you say, this is my goal, this is where I'm going?
Yeah, so for me, I think I definitely started a bit earlier. I definitely, when I was like probably in ninth grade, I started thinking about college. I know it's kind of absurd to think about it. And I don't know if that was the best way, but I know for me personally, I just love preparation. I love preparing in advance for things. So I remember in ninth grade, like probably start or middle or end of ninth grade, I was just like reading through online, like how to get to a good college because I know that was a stepping stone for what's next. And, for me, like personally, I'm just that type of person who really likes prepping in advance for stuff. So I was like reading, Prep Scholar, like blogs about like college admissions and YouTube feed. There were a bunch of like college application like reaction videos, even, and I was just like watching them excitedly, thinking that this is like my world, even though I was like 3 years before the fact. But
Got it. So you started early. Uh, and Lena, how many colleges did you end up applying? And how many accepted you? We would love to know your yield.
yeah, I think I applied to around like 15 colleges. Probably gone to like seven of them, seven, eight. So, yeah, probably like 50%. I guess like definitely like I definitely applied to a lot more than I probably should have. But it was fine, I guess. So I applied to a lot of like local schools around me, like state schools just as a backup. Like one school in the West Coast. My parents didn't really want me to go too far. Some schools in the South, and then a lot of Northeast.
Got it. Got it. So 50% is pretty impressive. What was your selection criteria? You mentioned there's one in West Coast, few state, but I'm assuming there was a selection criteria you put together and then applied. And then how did you decide which is going to be your reach, what's going to be your target, what's safety?
Yeah, so for me, what like I think one of the very much like constraining factor was the location geographically. That was one by far the thing that pretty much narrowed my list a lot. So my parents really didn't want me to go too far. From New York City, so did not want me to go to West Coast. So I didn't really apply to any schools in California and whatnot. Mainly stayed around like New England area, uh, the South. And that was definitely one of the constraining factors. The other ones were probably like the approach to learning. So really wanted to go to a liberal arts college, didn't really want to do research or, very like specialized like domain. Didn't really particularly want a very like pre-professional college as either. Also want to make sure that it had like the area of study that I wanted to focus. And just like looking more into the student culture, reading from sites like Unigo or like Reddit threads and things like that. Yeah.
Got it. So, so geo played a big part in the selection of schools.
Mhm.
Uh, how did you go about? I mean, 15 schools is a good number. How did you go about learning about the colleges? And I mean, clearly there's a geographic aspect of it, but there's a culture. You talked about liberal arts, right? How did you go about learning more about the colleges and then deciding and settling on the colleges?
Yeah, so what really helped me a lot was firstly getting a primer on the college itself. So would scroll the college's website, firstly look at videos, watch videos, maybe like a day in my life, or content published by the college itself. And then after that, if I wanted to do more digging into a particular college, what I found really helpful was talking to current students. So directly emailing them, messaging them on like email, like Gmail, or on like LinkedIn, for instance. I know I did that for like CMU, Barnard, and some other colleges. I kind of forgot at this point, but that was very helpful. Also, Reddit was very helpful if you didn't know anyone. High school alumni who went to these colleges, that was very helpful for me.
And then what about visiting? Because I hear a lot from students that they feel there's a benefit of visiting the school, but then a lot of students are not able to, for whatever reason, visit every school they want to apply to. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me, I personally didn't visit any colleges, to be honest. I mainly just went like virtual tours. I also think what was helpful was like information sessions, so like virtual information sessions. Those are really helpful. COVID definitely played a big impact. It was kind of like hard travel. My parents were not like, they just didn't really want me traveling too much because of COVID. Um, but I think another thing is I think like if you can't like travel to the college that you want to, what's really helpful is just like learning more about the vibe of the college through like information sessions, virtual. They have like some virtual like conferences for prospective students, looking at past videos. Those are very helpful. I think that sometimes like if you go in person, you get like a first impression, and then if you don't do any research before or after the fact, you just immediately eliminate it based on vibes. But like I think that's not the best way. Maybe like do more research, because maybe you just didn't really have a good experience. Maybe something happened, like you were on tour and that you bumped into someone who was like, don't apply to this college, but it's like, that person's definitely biased. So
Got it. Got it. And what was your strategy with early action and early decision? Did you decide to do early action and then not early action at all alone, but also early decision? Did you decide to do early decision, and then how did you pick which school to apply to?
yeah, for me, I think I was, more on the indecisive side. So I just did early action to a few colleges. Those were sort of like my safety net. So like if things didn't work out, then I'll go to these colleges. So kind of forgot this point, but I think it was early action to USC, Tulane, Georgetown, um, and some other ones. So those are great because you know beforehand that, oh, like these colleges have to do. So you kind of have a backup if all things fail. And also like, I didn't do early decision just because I just didn't really know what college I wanted to go to. I didn't really have a dream college really. I just want to keep my options open. And I just didn't want to like deal with the stress of, not getting in, and then or getting deferred and then like having to scramble for like 2 weeks because it's all very uncertain. I don't think it has a boost in your application really. I was like did a lot of research on early action, early decision. So listen to the Yale admissions office podcast and they said it doesn't really make a difference. So I was like, okay, I might as well just, not do early decision because why? Because like goes harkens back to the fact that I like doing a lot of prep before, and I just like having my options open and playing my cards right.
Got it. Oh, that's great. Once you found out there's really no benefit of early decision, then you decided it's all early action for you.
Hmm.
Now, pivoting to recommendations, that's an aspect that we find a lot of students don't particularly pay attention to, or at least as much as we recommend they do. So,
Hmm.
how did you decide to pick your recommenders, and
Hmm.
what personality trait did you want them to highlight based on which perhaps you chose your recommenders?
For sure. So I think recommendations are actually really important just because admissions officers know that it's an element of your application that you don't have any control over. So it's kind of like everything else in your admissions package is sort of like things that you have influence over, but recommendation letters, don't really have influence over it. You try your best, and then the recommender writes it. But for me, I think I asked my history and math teacher. Really like my history teacher. She was from my junior year of high school. I thought I did pretty well in the class, just in terms of participation, sort of like learning outside of the classroom, doing a lot of research before like class lessons, making sure that I, like talk to her after class, just like ask her questions about things when we covered interesting topics. Just be interesting, be engaging, be a standout student in a way that's not too overbearing. Just like be genuine about it. And like these teachers know that you probably want these recommendation letters, so it's kind of just like try your best in terms of being able to just like ask them politely, but know that they have a lot of obligations. So also do it early. And then my math teacher, also from junior year, I think junior year is pretty pivotal. Senior year, like spring semester, I mean fall semester, probably a bit, too time crunch for it. And sophomore year, it's a bit early on. So junior year, definitely, keep an eye out on like teachers I want to think about. But it was my math teacher, had him first period, so people were kind of like sleepy. So I think that definitely sort of worked out in my favor. I was always like helping out, if students had questions, going after in the afternoon, like after classes, like ask him questions, talk about his life and things like that. Thought that was super interesting, engaging, and just following up over email about, maybe like cool things I saw in the news and stuff like that. Just, try and like stand out in those like niche ways in a way, in a sense. Um, yeah, so those are sort of like, I guess in terms of the process for choosing the recommendators, made sure to have it diversified. So had someone in humanities, had someone in math/STEM. I don't think that's too necessary. I think it's sort of like a nice to have if you can have that, but definitely don't compromise on the quality just for diversification of subjects, because I don't think that'll hand you any favors at the end. Um, and in terms of just like asking, do it pretty early on. I would say kind of forgot the timeline, but probably like before school ends, maybe ask them like 2, 3 months before school ends, give them sort of a like this, maybe a Google Drive, like a long Google Doc of things that you want them to highlight. So I know for a history teacher, intellectual curiosity, really liking to learn, really being engaging, like a team player, being sort of like participating, but also adding on to other people's comments during class. For a math teacher specifically, it was a lot of like being a self-starter, learning topics outside of the classroom, kind of overlapped. And I told him about like my personal sort of like family life as well, and just like juggling all of it. So I think that was pretty good in terms of highlighting different dimensions of you outside of the classroom as well.
All right. So clearly, you spend a lot of time thinking about recommenders and then also making sure that you approach them early.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that's important, and a lot of students perhaps don't give it enough importance, is the hard facts that are attached to an application. Hard
Mm-hmm.
facts like ACT score, SAT score, your class rank,
Mm-hmm.
your GPA. Right? There's an aspect of your narrative, your story,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also an aspect of the real numbers.
Mm-hmm.
For our audience, would you mind sharing what were your stats?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I actually didn't take the SAT because of COVID, but GPA wise, so the 4.0, it was like unweighted. My school didn't do weighted GPAs, and also we didn't have weighted, so it wasn't, and it was on a 4.0 scale. Um, and then in terms of class rank, our school also didn't disclose class ranks just because they didn't want us to feel like too competitive about things like that. But probably say like definitely like top 5%. I think you should definitely aim for like top 5 to 10%, just because relative to your class, you know, I think I guess like the hard reality of it is that um, when admissions officers look at your profile, they are very much comparing you locally first to who your local competition is, which are your fellow classmates. And it's not to say that you have to outrank them in everything, but it's useful to just be in that league of like those top picks when it comes to filtering out applicants further. Also have a strong academic track record. I took a lot of APs, which are which my school offered. It was sort of limited, but I took all the APs there were. Took a lot of dual enrollment classes, which are like college classes, starting from ninth grade, just to differentiate like my application from other students, and definitely that was helpful.
Got it. So, given your experience, I mean, as you know, SATs were required, then COVID hit us, and
Mhm,
SAT became optional. Now, a lot of schools are going back to SAT required. Given your experience, and given that now you've been at Yale for a year,
mhm.
what are your thoughts on the impact of SAT ACT score on chances of you getting admitted?
Yeah, so I think that it's kind of interesting because I was talking to this to like my current classmates at Yale, and I think what's really interesting is that the tide is turning in the sense that SAT scores are gaining a lot more prominence because of grade inflation in high schools. It's just a matter of fact that there is no barometer for really standardizing how academically challenging or how academically sort of like positioned you are. So I think that the SAT can only really be put in the context of a college application to really standardize, I guess, your just like your academic prowess, that no other metrics can, just because it does standardize things, although it does come with consequences such as, resource disparities. And those, you can't exactly account for that when you talk about hard quantitative numbers, right? But in the context of college applications, I think that they should be seen as a sort of a when you try like pass a turnstile, right, to get to the next thing, sort of like because I'm in New York, so it's kind of like a car, like a metro card, turning the turnstile to regress further. I don't think they make or break your application at all. I think that once you hit like the minimum, or not minimum, but like once you hit the threshold, you're over the you're over the pile, I guess. Like you've made it out of the pile. And then further than that, it's just all about differentiation. It's not really about numbers. So it's not like, oh, like, what's the marginal impact of someone who has a 1540 and someone who has a 1590? There really isn't as much. It's probably just like, off by a few questions, like three questions or something. So
Got it. That's an interesting perspective. So the way you look at SAT and ACT is it's a filtering criteria.
yeah,
Once you filter in, basically, then other aspects of your
yeah,
application matter.
yeah.
Uh, but if you don't have a certain number, then the chances of you getting filtered out are higher.
Um, I guess like in the context of my application, I also don't know because I haven't looked at my admissions file yet, but I think that um it definitely was, I guess, like better for my year just because like it was sort of like generally accepted that if you didn't have SAT, it was probably because of like you couldn't take it or something like that. But now like there's so many more opportunities to take it, so definitely can have sort of a more negative connotation. But for me personally, I think it was just like imperfect information, and admissions officers can't directly infer based on not having information.
Got it. Got it. Now, turning to extracurriculars, another important aspect of an applicant background. So, what was your strategy for extracurriculars, Lina? Because I've heard students who talk about picking a few and going deep. And then I've talked to students who decide that they want to really do a number of different things to showcase the broad range of their competency. What was your approach and what would you recommend?
So yeah, extracurriculars are definitely very important. So um, for me personally, like I've heard both sides of the coin, but I personally decided to take it in the sense that I would specialize in one area, one activity very deeply, like one or two, and then go from there. Just because just based on the students I've interacted with at Yale and like other colleges, like during my application process, it just seemed that a lot of students had like a passion project or something they really honed in on. And I think that's much better. It's a much more compelling case of how you spend your time if you have that one project that you spent like 4 years on, like all throughout high school, and you really scaled it up, then sort of having like maybe like five different activities that you spend maybe like 5 hours a week each on. Um, yeah, so I think for me it was that having that spike, that specialty, because I think, you know, um, in the sense of like humans and how we sort of like perceive things, I think the interesting thing is um, people will perceive you based on like how interesting your profile is, how sticky you are. So, you know, if you are just going to pursue like five activities, um, like, you know, it's going to make it like more probabilistic that the admissions officers won't really recall you as well as someone who probably have that one really, really interesting activity if they really worked on it. It's like, oh wow, this is so interesting, this is so amazing. Like all your accomplishments really like summed up in one.
Got it. Can you share a bit more about your extracurricular activities, the ones that you participated in, as well as the leadership role, if any, you played in them?
Yeah, so for me, like one of my spike or one of the activities that I really focused a lot of my time on was a nonprofit organization that I founded during COVID. So this was July 2020. This was actually kind of started like basically the summer after my freshman year of high school. So this was probably like July, yeah, July, after I finished, so probably like a month after I finished my freshman year of high school. So I started, well, at first it wasn't really a nonprofit, it was sort of just like a learning endeavor to learn more about economics because my school didn't have any econ courses. Just wanted to learn more about it, sign up for a few classes because during COVID there were a lot of learning opportunities. And then started a Instagram account, just post a lot of content on on like economic stuff, economic content. It was sort of like a learning, like a personal learning journey for me. And then, you know, from there, quickly scaled it up. Was like, what if we host events? What if we have competitions? What if we um, have a lot of fun activities for students to really engage in economics because it's something that isn't really is sort of overlooked by high school curriculum, high school education, high school students. You know, um, so from July 2020, started the Instagram account. September 2020, hosted our first event. It was not easy at all. To secure the first speaker, had to do like a bunch of LinkedIn outreach. You know, trying to figure out my own. How do I even reach out to professionals? Where are all these professional databases at? It was very hard. I was 14 at the time. I couldn't even have a LinkedIn account, so I just, you know, lied about my age on the on the LinkedIn, and you know, it was very scrappy. It was very scrappy in the beginning, but definitely think it paid off, and I think it definitely has taught me to be very resourceful, very resilient, just being very, you know, being very like self-starter. So from there, had a first speaker, kept scaling up, started competitions. By the end, so when I started applying for colleges, so like let's say like September, October of my senior year, we hosted over, I believe it was like 60 virtual and in-person events. So we had, you know, we had like office tours in New York of like, you know, some big firms. So it was like an on-site firm visit, a lot of virtual events. Probably had like 100 participants at every single event at the time. So it was like every single weekend, or every other weekend. We had conferences, so like seasonal conferences, like fall, spring conferences, summer conference. It was a lot. Competition, stock market competition. Had to do a lot of funding too. Scaled up our team. We had like 30 people. Um, and then we started TikTok, and the TikTok blew up. We had a million views. It was amazing. It was a fun time. I remember just like junior year going into my first into like math class, and you know, before class started, just like was so happy that our new video blew up and people were just like talking about it. It was very fun. But it was definitely very hard. I think there were a lot of long hours, a lot of speaker cancellations. So, you know, had this one story where we had a conference going on and the speaker just told me like an hour beforehand that she couldn't make it. So we really had to improvise and like was like, oh, what should we do? Like, you know, to keep our audience engaged and things like that. But I think that was sort of one of the more formative experiences and activity that I spent a lot of time
Wow, that's awesome. That's inspirational.
on.
This one aspect that also comes up is role of awards in your application. right? How much should an applicant focus on collecting awards? Because there's an aspect of doing extracurricular because you enjoy it. Like clearly you enjoyed what you did.
Mm-hmm.
You spent a lot of hours, you did a lot of impactful activities because you enjoyed it. But there's
Mm-hmm.
an aspect of external validation.
Mm.
How do you balance the two?
Yeah, so the way that I like to think about awards is that once you get to the point that you love doing the activity that you really like doing, whether it be like like a social impact project, which was that for me, or if you really like quiz bowls or doing like science olympiads or things like that. Once you really get to that point, I think it will just come naturally, right? The award aspect, because it's like you are spending more time on this activity than like I guess like 99% of other students. So theoretically, if that was the case, you would collect a lot of awards as a byproduct of spending so much time and energy into those activities. So I don't think they're sort of mutually exclusive in the endeavors or the time commitment um, for these two. It should come naturally. And honestly, I wouldn't care too much about awards just because or just like the process of just like collecting them. I don't like the idea of like collecting awards just for your application, right? Because that doesn't sound like what you should be doing. You should just let it come, but also be on the lookout and seek those opportunities. Increase the chances of applying or even knowing about these awards, because I know when I first started my activity, I didn't even know that I could get funding for my nonprofit. I was just using my own money, which is kind of stupid, but that because I didn't know. Um, so I think that for future students and advice, just like let it come naturally, and if you like that activity, if you can spend this much like, time persistent into it, and it'll really pay off in dividends, not just the activity part but also the award part.
Got it. Got it. Turning to the aspect of application that perhaps every applicant struggles with, uh, application essays,
Mm,
Lena, right? What was the topic that you decided to pick? Because you have a lot of different things going on for you. Now,
right.
there's an aspect of picking a topic, there's an aspect of picking the nuance that you want to highlight within your essay
Mhm,
for the topic. And then how do you how did you approach writing it?
mhm. For sure. So for me, I definitely did a lot of brainstorming, read a few books, had like this essays to get into an Ivy League book. Started reading that like in ninth grade, which is insane. I don't think I should have done that, but I did. But I think in terms of picking a topic, I think definitely pick something that's something that just like roots you. That's really rooted in your identity, and it's not something that you've developed as a byproduct of like you trying to gain the application system. I think it's something that should be like genuinely true to you. And I know for me personally, that was talking about my personal background, personal upbringing, and my family. I know it's probably just like more of like a cliche thing, but I think like my early life experiences has definitely molded me a lot. Um, and I really want to touch on that personal aspect of my life and how it's shaped me into my present day. Um, and then, I think in terms of selecting the topic, a lot of other, I know a lot of supplemental essay prompts ask about things such as your extracurricular, your academic interests, because inevitably you have to pick a major, right? So they're like, why do you want this major? So I kind of wanted to talk a bit more about the things that were truly personal to me, hence personal statement. But supplemental essays, I think those are more for things that really supplement your application and the things that you are submitting about. So you're submitting information details briefly about your extracurriculars, about your major interests, what you want to study at this college, why this college. Those are for supplements. I think your personal essay, your personal statement should be about your just like something that's deeply personal to you, and it's not something that maybe like developed in ninth grade. It should probably be something that maybe you developed like earlier on. That was more like formative and has really like carried you throughout your high school experience. Yeah.
Got it. That's great advice. How long? I mean, I know you said you started looking at essays, reading about essays from ninth grade. How long did you spend in shaping your essay? And now that you look back, what would be your advice? What is the right time frame? When should folks start looking at essays, putting them together, putting the drafts together, uh, where when it's the most effective, most impactful?
Yeah, so I think you just start thinking about it probably. Um, I forgot the timeline, but I remember thinking about it like, you know, I think constantly having it in your mind, sort of like secondary to you as you progress through high school. Like, I guess like um, freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, um, I sort of like earlier on, I sort of like had a running like journal or like document like reflections on how my life is going, my thoughts, my aspirations. That definitely grounded me a bit because like I still have the journal, I still write in it, I like talk about how college is, for my future self down the line when I'm like 30 or something. Um, but definitely just like writing, just like having a personal journal or something, like writing about how you're feeling, maybe on a month to month basis, because I think that will have something more for you to like reflect on, given that you are in a position, if you are in like freshman year, sophomore year, that you're more in it for a long run. But junior year, senior year, definitely think about it a bit more. So I know senior year, I did a lot of reflection. I think over the summer. Um, Before my senior year, I believe, or yeah, before my senior year. Um, um, I definitely started early, so like junior spring probably started thinking about it. So did a lot of reflection, read a few books on how to think about it. Um, Probably had like a few like paper and pencil, just jotting down like Venn diagrams and things like that. Really trying to like map out like who am I, like what's my identity, like what are the values that I really care about, because I think those things like you just don't really think about on a daily basis, but it looms large. It's like it's a theme throughout your life. So really finding that connecting thread, starting early, thinking about it definitely helped me a lot, because I know in comparison to my peers, my high school like classmates and things, like they thought about it a bit late. And I think that probably hinders you a bit, just because you kind of have that you don't have the time cushion, right, to really think about these things. So you just want to write about the first thing that comes to my mind because you don't have the time. But for me, I like having that time cushion to really, slow down, think, and pause.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's great advice. Um, Lina, were you invited for interviews?
Yes.
Okay, so what advice would you give applicants when it comes to preparing for college interviews?
Yeah. So firstly, I would just say don't worry about the college interview process, because I think going in, I was pretty feeling nerve wracked as well, because I was like, oh, who is this adult? Like, why do they want to know about me? But I think these alumni interviewers, they really just like judge you based on, or they like assess you based on like how personal you are. Um, what are some of the qualities that you possess, such as like, you know, and like, are you interesting? Can you talk about a topic um, that will like keep me captivated? And also, um, it's kind of like a mock simulation. Like, what kind of future classmate, roommate, or future, I guess like just like a fellow student be like, would I want to talk to this person? And the alumni interviewer just asked a few questions about like basic questions about like, oh yeah, what are your interests? What's your background? Um, why do you study this? What class are you taking during high school? What are you enjoying about it? A lot of these basic questions, but I think it's definitely about expanding on it, talking about why it's interesting to you personally, and just asking good questions to really express your interest. And it's just that simple. And I don't think you should be worried if you don't get the alumni interviews. Spots are definitely limited, really based on like how many alumni interviewers there are in your area. So New York, there are a lot. So I did a couple of alumni interviews. But it's just another piece of the application.
That's great advice. Thank you, Lina. Uh, One of the major concerns that parents and students have shared with us is the cost of attending a 4-year school.
Mm.
While we understand every student situation is different, is there any guidance you would offer students as they tackle this topic?
Definitely. So, I definitely think that finances play a very big role in really determining if you can afford a college. And that was definitely the case for me. So, talking early on with your parents help a lot. Um, Also, what really helped me was applying to a bunch of merit-based scholarships. Those big ticket scholarships open up like um, there's a lot like junior year, senior year, but there aren't a lot once you reach the end of college application season. So you should be simultaneously applying for these scholarships while applying to colleges. And that's the balancing act. That's the hard part. But, as I mentioned, if you start early, prepare in advance, you're fine. Um, and also just like I remember using like the net like aid calculator a lot. That helped a lot. And also just like figuring out how much debt or how many like loans would you be willing to take out. Just like ask those questions. And you don't want it to like slap your face once you like got it and you can't afford it, and it's like a week before you have to accept things and you haven't even talked to your parents about it. Just like doing a lot of prep beforehand.
No, that's great advice. And you mentioned balancing. Clearly, Lina, you had extracurricular activity going for you. You were focused on studies. You're focused on application. You're focused on merit scholarships. So, how did you balance managing schoolwork and all those other activities during your high school, particularly the junior and the senior year?
Yeah, I think, junior, senior years were very pivotal moments in my life, but it was also the most challenging ones. So definitely take advantage of breaks. So winter break, spring break, Thanksgiving break. I definitely, um, use a lot of those times to really like step on the pedal and just like, blaze through and just like do as much work as I could, just because the demands of schoolwork was definitely very challenging with these extracurricular activities I had going on. Also, sometimes it'll get very rough. Like I'm not gonna, I guess like laugh it off or whatever. But I took like I implemented like a few breaks in my extracurricular activities, so that I could focus, and so my team members, because they were also going through the same process, to focus on um, these things. Um, I remember like junior senior year during like the most like busiest times, we would routinely have probably like 1 week, 2 week breaks because nobody really wanted to do work. Like people want to do their schoolwork. So it was kind of just like trying to beat trying to beat the horse to get it to go faster when people were just not motivated to do so. So definitely keeping that in mind, especially as I was like the leader of everything. So being mindful of that, of those dynamics are very definitely relevant for me. Keeping a planner, I think it goes. Uh, a lot of people say like, having a task calendar sort of. I remember I had like Notion. I had like to-do list, which is like this Kanban board, which I used to like send me notifications like things I need to do, and I was very judicious about things. I think personally for me, like I'm just a type to be very to have a sense of urgency to the point that maybe sometimes it's a bit bad because it's like bad for my mental health. But a lot of late night, a lot of planning in advance, just doing things early, finding pockets of time. So like after school, uh, I think that you have a lot more time than you realize. Um, we have 168 hours a week, but just being very mindful about how you manage and allocate those hours because it's a lot, but they can go by fast if you don't allocate them well.
Great advice. You mentioned your yield was a little over 50%. So you get rejected from some schools that you wanted to get admitted to. How did you handle rejection? You're at Yale, so clearly you're doing great. But
Mhm.
at the same time, how did you mentally handle rejection so that you kept going on?
Yeah, yeah. Rejection is tough. I think, when I first received my rejection, it was from some like very obscure school. I don't know, but I think uh, what's the mindset I want to keep throughout was just like I did as much as I can throughout high school, and I know that I did as much as I can, and it's not really a reflection of my efforts per se. It was more of factors that I can't personally control. I think that was a mindset that I wanted to have throughout, and I think that kept me sane through a lot of difficult moments. Because um, for me personally, I guess like my satisfaction or just like my perception of myself really comes from the fact that I want to do as much as I can, um, to the extent that I can control those things. Because those things I can't control, like I'm not. I don't want to say like I'm not held responsible for it, but it's like I can't influence it, so I can't be hard on myself for things I can't influence. So
Well, that's such a great mental framework. Thanks for sharing that. Now that you're basically at Yale, you've gone through the application process. From your perspective, what are the key traits and experiences do you think Ivy League schools look for in an applicant?
yeah, so this is definitely an interesting question because I feel like I've met a wide range of students at Yale and other Ivy League colleges. I think what really I think what not exactly differentiates, but I think what like a trait that I see over and over and over again is really like someone who's very genuine, someone who really has a passion for something, someone who really has a passion for learning, participation in the classroom and outside of the classroom, being very friendly, being very open to things. I think those are the main traits that I've seen a lot. um, you know Knowing a lot of like different cool facts or something, being very open in a sense like new experiences, being very kind, because I think that the way you treat others is a reflection of who you are. I think also being very intellectually curious, also definitely having the academic prowess, being able to speak up for yourself, having an opinion on things. I think these traits are all just like applicable not only for college itself, but just for the workplace, or just like beyond, or for a career, like having an opinion on things. What really differentiates you from the crowd? Your lived experiences plus your academic credentials, which gives you sort of like your personal perspective on things, your unique spin on things, um, and just being able to voice them, being able to execute them to action through like your extracurriculars, and being successful in them. Being able to do something for like 3 years, 4 years straight, definitely requires a lot of commitment, but um, being very motivated is important. Yeah.
That's such a great summary, Lina. Thank you for sharing. We created Good Goblin to help college applicants like yourself a year ago, right, to really get on top of their college application process. What is your take on Good Goblin and the aid to college applicants?
Yeah, I definitely think that Good Goblin really stands out from other like college application services in the sense that it's very personalized, like AI technology to really offer those personalized essay advice and college matching and like evaluations. I think it's also very affordable in comparison to other like packages like college application resources that I've seen. It's very customized, so I definitely recommend it, especially if you are a student who wants affordable options, but also want curated options. Those two sometimes can seem mutually exclusive and sort of other college like paid services, but Good Goblin really stands out in this in this industry.
Thank you so much, Lina. I really appreciate you taking the time. It was so much fun to learn from you. Thank you. And we wish you the best as you continue with Yale.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great speaking.